48-hour art check, round 62.
All right. Yeah.
We are back.
Back with a vengeance.
Yeah.
And you're back. You're back home.
I'm home. I'm no longer on the road. It's great. In fact, that was a whole conference about YouTube and how to do well on YouTube, and it was really interesting. I met some really interesting people. And a lot of things that I was like talking about there kind of reminded me of a lot of things that we've been talking about. And so we're going to change things up. And so what we're going to do from now on is we're going to start with the topic, exhaust that, and then do the check at the end. And then do we want to talk about the rest or wait until we're ready to announce stuff?
Well, I think maybe we can maybe we can spitball that kind of thing and talk a little bit about like conventions, because I'm going to my first kind of designer convention actually tomorrow, like afternoon. I'm leaving to get to the hotel, and then Monday through Wednesday I'll be at Adobe Max, which I know you've been at before in the past.
Yeah.
So I have all kinds of curiosity about those events, stuff like that. And I do feel like we could actually kind of touch on some of the format changes and ideas, and then maybe roll that into whether or not like those conferences are kind of beneficial, because I'm guessing you'd land on the side of beneficial. And so I'm kind of curious, like what you get out of them, what to kind of look for, what to look out for, that kind of thing. So yeah, so let's start with like the format changes.
Okay.
You want to get into it?
Yeah. So what I was thinking, and I've been thinking this for a while, but everything's just been crazy and stuff, and so I had some time to like. It's always been like one of those thoughts in the back of my head, but now that there's been some time to like actually think about it. Live streaming is huge. There were quite a few sessions on live streaming and what to do, and actually. In one of them, they were like, "Okay, let's talk about upload times and how long your videos are." And a huge portion of the videos that are uploaded to YouTube are like 3 to 5 minutes, like a huge portion of them. But actually, the most watched videos are like 12 to 15 minutes, and then they didn't even have data for like 25 plus.
Huh.
But people enjoy the longer form content, and so that made me feel good with what we're doing, because I think we're kind of there with like the length of the content. But then the other thing I was thinking was I was trying to think like from the end consumer, right? So we have two audiences with this show. One is the people that are able to join us live and jump into the chat, which is super awesome and has. Like in the last month, I feel like really changed the show for the better. Like the engagement that we've gotten has been really cool. The comments that people make, including when people call me out on my hypocrisy and stuff like that. It's fun. And I really like that. And I think it adds to the show. The second audience are those people that don't catch the live show, but watch the live show later. And there's a really interesting situation there where we had... In episode 61, we had Stephen Henderson on, who's a journalist and a writer, studied at the Columbia School of Journalism, and is struggling to kind of get stuff. He had a bunch of first chapters written of novels that he wants to get to. And the chat on the live show was dead. It was there wasn't anybody there for that episode, but the chat was super engaging in the comments afterwards. And so there's those two different audiences. And as I was thinking about those two different audiences, I think it would be annoying to be in the second audience the way that we've got it formatted now. So I actually like the idea of doing the topic first and letting that run however long it runs. We're not good at sticking to 10 to 15 minutes, but sometimes there'll be 10 minutes, sometimes it's going to be 25. And then when we're done, we kind of wrap up with our art check. at the
Yeah,
end.
and I think that's brilliant from the standpoint of anybody watching, even people who are following the art checks. Some of the people who've kind of taken on the art check kind of challenge that we've placed out, which, by the way, if you guys haven't, we really advocated for it.
Yeah.
Like, find a friend, hold each other accountable to like getting progress done on your creative projects. Doesn't even have to be art related. It could be writing related. Like, watch our last art check with his friend that he was referencing. I just thought that conversation was excellent. It was cool to kind of walk through with somebody some of the excuses and some of the roadblocks that kind of come up when you're trying to take on a creative challenge. One of the huge things is like holding yourself accountable. So I think that's a huge part of the show, and I think that's a huge benefit for people doing it. But when I've watched people do it myself, I kind of want them to get into the chat, the talking, and then at the end find out, okay, did you guys stick to your goals?
Right.
So I think that's really good to have it start with the topic at the beginning. So yeah.
And then I was also thinking along the lines of the user first, right? Because we've built this show backwards from what most people do. We built it from our perspectives and our needs to motivate us, right? And if people wanted to come along for the ride, that's great. I believe it serves that purpose and continues to serve that purpose, but also it has evolved into a really interesting conversation. It's a shorter format to kind of get these little micro conversations of 10 to 15, 20 minutes of these topics. And I was thinking that those would make for really good podcasts. And you've had, with Kevin Cross, and you've had some exceptionally good content in podcasts and some really big success. And you've mentioned on your show and on Artcasters and stuff where you'll go to like the NCS, the National Cartoonist Society, and people that you don't expect to know you will know you from that podcast. And I think it's because podcasts have a really big reach. And so I was also thinking, and I think you had thoughts concurrently along these lines, taking like a best of and cutting that down, not really editing it, but just like taking the chunks that make sense for audio only and also uploading those into a podcast. Maybe we do that once a week. Here are the 3 topics we talked about this week, or maybe we do that every time. It kind of depends, but I think I figured out a way to do that so that it's not like a huge time burden. And so that's kind of exciting too, to be able to kind of roll this into content that can travel, that you could listen to while you're commuting, or while you're out and you can't watch, or you don't have a good signal. You can just, because podcasts will download. YouTube shows don't download. So podcasts can go with you. And there's a lot of cars that are kind of tied in now as you buy new vehicles. They're tied into podcasts a lot more than that. And obviously video isn't great to watch in the car.
Yeah. And if you think it's great to watch in the car, I hope you've got really good insurance.
Right.
I think that's a great idea. It's funny, Greg in the chat just brought up a thing I hadn't even thought of, but he said the only issue with talking first, and this will roll into kind of something else I think we're going to touch on that we want to do. But he said, I often don't know you're on until later in the show, so I might catch the update only sometimes. And we're going to be working on some methods and troubleshooting ways to kind of try to give people an earlier heads up. I don't know if we want to get super into like the technicality of how that'll happen, but we're working on it. So we're going to,
Ultimately, without getting too technical, we're going to try to pre-schedule the show so that it will. So instead of what we have been doing, which is like kind of this last minute, hey, are you ready? I'm ready, and then we kind of like scramble. A day or two in advance, we'll have picked a time, and we'll try to stick to that as much as possible. And YouTube and possibly Twitter. I'm thinking of just having a Twitter account that only announces when we're live, just a dedicated Twitter account, because people can use Twitter to trigger things like IFTTT and stuff like that. And so
That's awesome.
Yeah, so we don't have anything solid at the moment, but I'm hoping by next week we'll be scheduling these more regularly, because I did think about that, and Greg brings up a really good point, and that's why I do the 1 minute countdown at the beginning, is to give people time to kind of get down and sit down and whatever. But sometimes we start at 9, sometimes we start at 9:15, sometimes we're the next day. But for the most part, I'd say 95% of the time, we're at 9 p.m. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, California time.
Yeah, and the neat thing about this show that I like is it's kind of an ever-evolving experiment that isn't set in stone. So, I mean, if you guys have been following along from, round one, initially it started a little more clumsily. There was less animation involved. We didn't have a timer, which we absolutely need. If you guys didn't realize we need it, like, just see, even with timers, like how much we go over, because we really enjoy conversation, which is part of the reason I think this thing sustained itself, is like meeting Cory, meeting you in person. Same thing happened when I met Scott in person. Whenever I meet people in person and I'm like, this is just a friend, like, this isn't just like some internet thing, it's an actual friend. Right. So it's like it's also a nice excuse to kind of have a great conversation with a friend, like, once every other day, and that to me is going to be one of the things that sustains the show too. So so cool. Was there more? Should we I feel like we're scratching the surface on some of the stuff we might I think we covered all the major things. The last thing that I have gotten several comments from people who watch, the timer that I had before was one really long video that played, and I didn't have the ability to pause it because of the technology I'm using. And so today what I've actually done is I've set it up so that now I have the ability to start. I actually have 6 different videos that I can start and stop them whenever I want. And what that will do is, and this is where it comes in to feedback. And so if you guys have any feedback, actually, tell us in the chat or tell us in the comments, because this isn't like a dictatorial top-down show. Like, all of the changes that we're making are from people saying, hey, it'd be cool if you guys did this, or exactly. And it's usually people like that feel comfortable telling me I'm doing something stupid. And that's this change, is my wife, who's comfortable telling me when I'm doing something stupid, right? In a loving way. She was watching the show, and she said, I like it, but it seems like you guys are rushed because you're both very good conversationalists. And so the problem is, in a good conversation, it's a reciprocal thing. It goes back and forth. And so when I say, here's what I've done, and I say it in 30 seconds, and then Josh is supposed to start right after and tell me what he said, Josh's inclination is to comment on what I just said, and I do the same thing. And so what we end up doing is stepping on each other's, cutting into our own 30 seconds. So now we have the ability, and we're going to try this on a limited basis because we're both bad at sticking to a time. So I might have to add a timer, I don't know. But we're going to try to not have the 30 seconds run into each other, and if there's a comment, you can make a comment, and we can have a short conversation and then move on to the next stage. And I think that'll make it more interesting as well, because a lot of it is like, we're doing really cool stuff, and I always feel like I want to like say something about yours, and then I'm like rushed or whatever. And so same here.
Yeah, that's kind of the last thing. So
cool.
And you'll notice that the timer has been over here. The timer has been sitting here waiting for me instead of rushing me. And so I'm like nerding out right now because I was able to figure this out. I'm way more excited than is probably worth it. But when I push this button, it will start. So anyway. No,
it's kind of cool. It's totally worth getting excited about, man. I mean, you are like, I think, the animation genius of the two of us. And so it's cool to me to see you get a win on that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Greg was saying, do you guys still need a timer? And I think we would both concurrently say, yeah. I mean, the thing is, like, if you watch the last Artcasters, I loved it. It was a nice, long, really in-depth conversation between three guys. And I think if we were in the same town, we'd probably just do that once a week.
Yeah.
Just meet up in a room and just chat for an hour and a half about art and about issues and about, motivation and stuff like that. But I think since our goal of this is also to make ourselves productive and try to build this as hopefully like a community of a lot of creators doing the same thing. Like,
right.
and the goal is making stuff. Yeah. I mean, like, I think we'd probably be in agreement that the timer is good.
Yes. Yeah. And I still maintain that once I feel, and I don't feel like I've gotten there yet, once I feel like I have all of the assets where they're useful and they're super easy, I'm going to do a big video explaining how I set this up, and then I'm going to give those assets away for free, because there is a considerable amount of, what would you call that? Barrier to entry, I think is the business term. There's a huge barrier to entry when we're talking about doing everything that I've done to set this up. And that's not to like toot my own horn, but I would rather have people jump in and get started after maybe 30 minutes of setting things up than do what we had to do and spend like 2 weeks like illustrating and animating and tweaking and changing and whatever. And so
Agreed.
Once I get that, I'm going to have a little zip folder that I'll just throw up on Gumroad. And so anybody who wants to jump in on this format, I'm going to give you the timer. I'm going to give you the layout. I'm going to show you how to do the split screen that we're doing here. And I'll do a big long tutorial that you can just follow through one time. And if you want to have the little Elgato thing that I've got here like this, then you can do that. It's like $150. If you don't, it'll still work just by clicking with your mouse. And so if you've got a computer that will run it, everything else is freeware. And so other than just being willing to spend 15 to 30 minutes 3 times a week, there shouldn't be anything that gets in your way. And so
yeah,
I'd like to get to that point before episode 80, I think, and then we'll be able to kind of like really scale this thing and get a lot of people involved. And it doesn't have to be like Josh said. It doesn't have to be just comics or children's books or illustration. Any sort of creative endeavor or any sort of productivity. I mean, I can see people doing this with working out, or doing this with crocheting, or doing this with macrame, or writing. You've got NaMoWriMo coming up. Lots of different things. Almost to the point where I'm tempted to make my students do it and force them. But we'll see. we'll see how far we go. But it's super productive. So that's more rambly and detailed than probably want to get. But yeah, the idea is we want as many people to do this as possible because it's been hugely beneficial.
Exactly. And we want to see people making stuff. That's the goal of, like, I think Cory and I both share this, like, we've both been people who've been stuck in a rut of not making stuff. And so coming up with systems or figuring out ways to kind of help people overcome that rut, like we have, when you've been there and you've kind of gotten through a rut, you want to pull other people out too. So, yeah. So that's really the impetus of this thing in the first place. And like I said, having good conversation too. Yeah. So, should we dive into kind of what we've gotten done and how that's all worked out?
Okay. Do you want to start this time?
Sure.
Okay. Watch this. I will press this button and the timer will start. Hey, look at that.
It's like magic. All right, so I finished my page, which I'm really excited about. So you can check it out at quarterlystories.com. But it's a sequence where my kid character is sitting drawing a picture in class in his trapper keeper, and this bully just slams the trapper keeper in his nose. And so it's the start of kind of a bit of a story arc towards the end of the first book. So I'm pretty excited.
Yeah. That turned out really good. I like that sequence because if you look, it's a little hard to see at the bottom, but that 3-panel sequence right in a row is almost like stop motion or like storyboard style. So you really feel that hit.
Yeah, I really like doing that kind of limited animation type stuff in comics, and a lot of that is kind of borrowed from Chris Ware.
Yeah.
Because I do love when he does that in his comics, and yeah. So thank you.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, so for me, I got several more characters done, and honestly, not a ton of work done, just because I've been on the road and traveling all day yesterday, renting cars and getting on planes because I don't live I live 4 hours away from an airport, and so we've got a couple characters there that are finished and some more background. I actually found a pretty cool way of doing that, whereas it was pretty portable. So, but yeah, so there's 2 of the 3 Powerpuff Girls, and then the Samus, and some more background stuff that I did.
I really love how that's coming out, and it was cool to see it in person during that art, the last art check, which I really encourage, if you guys haven't watched it, watch it. It was good. And that system with the 2 boards is just it's brilliant. So yeah, I think go back, watch that video, because he's got a pretty cool little portable portfolio that you don't have to like lug around your shoulder, and doesn't have to be gigantic. So
that was cool.
Yeah.
So how about challenges?
So my biggest challenge was basically just time and time management. So, which is always going to be a continual thread. So it was that and a little bit of stubbornness. My wife kind of pointed out a detail that was missing in that first panel of that 3-panel sequence you mentioned.
Yeah.
And this is how it usually works, because my wife's really honest, which when you mentioned that, it kind of reminded me of it. But because tends to be really honest with me and straightforward with me. She said, the Trapper Keeper's like missing this thing. And I was like, ignored it for a day, and then I went and added it in, which is usually how that goes. But right. That's the beauty of having someone in your life who will be honest with you, because it's literally prevented me from making so many stupid story errors, or having like a character who's carrying a bag and then not carrying a bag, that kind of the type of sequential errors that happen in comics. So it was a nice save of a challenge. Yeah. So
yeah, and it's really good to have somebody who is willing to just give you that feedback, and spouses are great for that. That's been my main experience. But yeah, my wife knows nothing about visuals, but knows what she likes, doesn't like, and can always say, it looks weird there. There's something weird about that. And then just an extra set of eyes, and I look at it and I'm like, yeah, there is. The anatomy's off or whatever. And you're in an even better boat because your wife's an incredible illustrator. So.
Yeah, she is. She's amazing. You guys should check her out. Kemble. So check it out.
Yeah. I can't remember. Did I do challenge? I think I did.
You did challenges. Wait, no, you didn't do challenges. Do your challenges.
Yeah, basically travel. Basically on the road.
You did.
Okay.
You did do challenges.
I can turn it on and turn it off. That's the great thing about this.
That's so beautiful. Okay, yeah, you did do challenges because you were talking about the on the road, off the road stuff.
Yeah. So what are your plans?
So you didn't decide to drive and draw?
Yeah.
So my plan is so I have Adobe Max coming up, and so I think most of what I'm going to be doing is thumbnailing preceding pages. So that's what I'm going to try to do, is thumbnail as many pages as I can. Probably try to thumb at least the next page, but it'd be nice to have like a couple worked out so that when I get back I can hit the ground running. So
yeah, that's great. That's a fun show. I've been 2 years in a row. I think you'll like it. I'm excited to hear your thoughts on it. Yeah, so plans for me are basically the same thing I've been doing, though I do want to tweak a few more things as I'm running through this live show. So I'm gonna get a few more characters inked and make some progress on that. I've got to get some pencils knocked out. But then there's also a lot of behind the scenes stuff that I'm going to be doing to my YouTube. Based on this conference I went to, maybe we could talk about some of that stuff as I kind of process it a little bit more. But my plans are just basically trying to get... I met some really cool people who are kind of willing to help me with getting the word out on my channel. And some people that are going to do some collabs and things like that. So, yeah. So I'm looking forward to just kind of scheduling some of that and kind of tweaking it and going back and forth with some of those guys. So,
I love it.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I'm excited about with this upcoming conference too. Is just the amount of information, you know, from just one day of that is going to be, I think, something that'll take like weeks and months and sometimes maybe even years to process. And just the idea of having that in 3 days, just that experience of like kind of being able to walk into a room and be one of the least, and like for me, it's like, I love that moment of walking into a room and feeling like the stupidest person in the room. Like I want that. And so I'm excited about having like 3 days of that where, you know, I'll walk into places where there's experts and craftsmen that I can just kind of soak up information from, and hopefully it'll be beneficial. So yeah, and it'll be fun. I mean, there's a lot of free food and drinks, so
yeah,
it should be fun too.
I think what you'll find is probably what I found, and this is good advice for anybody going to any of these professional conferences. They're a lot different than a convention. I've noticed that almost everyone is really, really good at writing an engaging description of what their workshop is going to be about. That doesn't necessarily match the quality of the workshop. And so the reason I'm not going to Max a third time in a row is the second time that I went, it kind of confirmed to me that probably half of the workshops I went to were pointless, meaning they were good for somebody of a different skill level than me, but for me they were a huge waste of time. But they sounded in the description just as good as everything else. And this happened at the thing I just went to as well, at Vid Summit. Some incredibly insightful stuff that just blew my mind that I'm going to go watch the replay over and over again, and then just some inanely stupid drivel. And it was really hard to tell from the descriptions what's what. So the one trick that I found, and I'm really bad at doing this, is doing your research beforehand. Like, check out the credentials of the people speaking and see if they have anything online that you could look at. And you can tell pretty quickly by saying, oh, this person hasn't done anything, and then here's this YouTube channel of them stuttering through something, versus, oh, this is Dan Stiles, who has done like some of the most famous gig posters ever, you know, or DKNG, you know, or whatever. And once you get like some credentials, that's the kind of sifter that I found. Now, having gone to 4 or 5 like professional conferences, that's the key for me is their credentials.
That's a good call. That's a really good call. I mean, part of why I even advocated for going to this was because like Jessica Hish and Aaron Draplin are 2 people who, like, if I can sit in a room with them for like 20 minutes and learn anything from them, I'm happy.
Yeah.
Because they're both people I really admire. And then the other stuff is just kind of icing on the cake. So my thought on going into it, having never been, is just like, if I can come out, you know, like with 5% new ideas, that's great, you know?
Yeah.
If I can come out with any new ideas, that's great. If I come out dry, then I may never go back.
Yeah.
So,
and you won't. I mean, it's a good conference. It's really good. But but both times I went, I just had that experience where I was like, they clickbaited me, you know. And it wasn't every one. Probably more.
And
often
the problem
than not,
is,
they were really good.
You're surrounded by other professionals too, so it's not like you can do what you'd do at a con if you were like in a panel that was like super dull, just kind of sneak out. you kind of can't pull that off in a pro convention as well. You know, yeah,
yeah,
that's a good call.
Yeah.
Just be like, oh, I gotta use the restroom. Never come back.
Sit on the edges. Sit on the edges of the row, and you can bail.
That's good thinking. That's good thinking. I'll keep a clear view of the door.
Yeah, if you're like front and center, you can't do it. But if you're like, I don't know, I'm terrible. I'm always like back row next to an aisle that's closest to the door, and then nobody ever notices if I bail.
Yeah, I think that's a really good call. And like Greg just reiterated, free food and drinks, which is, I completely agree. I'm excited about that too. So
and Max does good food. Like, it's legit.
Oh yeah,
it's good food. So anyway,
sweet,
cool. Well, now I feel like we need to talk about something for 20 minutes, but now this is the end of the episode. So
I know what is going on.
But yeah. So in the comments, let us know what you think of the changes. I'm curious on whether you prefer it front-loaded or back-loaded, and whether that's contingent on if there's some notice of when we're going to go live rather than kind of the last minute that we've been doing. And I'm also super curious because I know quite a few people that watch this show are at the drawing table listening. And so I'm very, very curious on whether or not a podcast is something that you guys are interested in, and why.
Yeah, agreed. And if any of you have been to like conventions recently, you know, let us know your thoughts on those too in the chats, because curiosity just it's my first time, so we'll see.
Yeah. Oh, and I forgot the biggest piece of advice. It's too late now. Next episode, the biggest piece of advice that I got from several people who were doing these live streaming things is they're like, hey, your audience that's showing up that likes what you're doing, they like what you're doing. So if you ask them to share it while you're live, that's not weird. And so we need to get into the habit of, like, at the start, sometime in the middle, you know, not so it's like weird and pushy or whatever, but just like a reminder to people to say, hey, you know, if you're liking what you're hearing, like, share this real quick on whatever. Yeah. Because if you do that, it doesn't really like interrupt anything for anybody. But it will also gain an audience. And so, like, the more people that come and jump in, just the better the show is going to get, because if it's more than just you and I, it's always better. So
100% agree.
Cool. So if you want to check out the music that you heard at the beginning of this episode, go to No Saboteurs on Facebook. If you want to check out Joshua Kemble's stuff, you can see it at quarterlystories.com, including the pages that you have seen made on this very show. And if you want to check out my stuff, you can go to corykerr.com. If you want to get on my email list, go to corykerr.com/email, and I will be actually sending out an email tomorrow morning. So if you want that email, get on there and let us know about podcasts and any convention tips, or they're not conventions. What are they called? Are they conventions?
Conferences.
Conferences. Sorry, I'm stuck in like comic book world. Any conference tips? We'd love that as well. And we'll see you guys in a couple days, most likely at 9 p.m. on Wednesday, California time. Word. No, Monday. It's Saturday. I don't know. I've been at a conference all week. But Monday, 9 p.m. California time, we'll go live again. And we'll see you guys then.
Bye.